So next up, I'd like to welcome Robert Wares, Chairman of the Board, President and CEO of Osisko Metals. Osisko recently announced an updated mineral resource estimate at Copper Mountain as part of its Gaspé copper project. Robert?
Merci, mesdames et messieurs. Je vais présenter en anglais aujourd'hui, mais je vais être dispo cet après-midi si vous avez des questions concernant le projet. So, Osisko Metals, part of the Osisko family, we're essentially focused on base metal development, now called critical metals in Canada. And with the two main projects, I won't get into our view on copper markets. Suffice it to say that we're very bullish. And if you want, again, those kinds of details, I only have 15 minutes, so I'll have to skip that aspect. So, Pine Point project, which is the initial project we acquired back in 2018, brownfield site. It's a zinc lead project, now joint ventured with Appian Capital. Where we have a free carried to FID over the next 4 years. And last year we acquired Gaspé Copper from Glencore. It's the old stomping ground for myself. I actually worked there in the early 90s as a geologist. And it was a sleeping asset for Glencore. So we structured a deal in which we basically get it again to FID, shovel ready with permits, feasibility, etc. And Glencore gets 100% of the concentrate on an offtake agreement that's already been negotiated. So fairly simple structure. Gaspé Copper was run by Noranda for a better part of 45 years. It was an iconic Canadian mine. It actually had its own smelter, which is something you hardly ever see today. And this is a shot of the complex circa 1990 with a Copper Mountain pit in the background. So it was both open pit and underground operation. The underground operation was focused on the stratiform skarn deposits underground. Quite a spectacular operation, actually. The pillars were 35 meters high, so certainly one of the biggest underground operations in its time, with over 125 kilometers of development. Adjacent to the town of Murdochville, which was the mining town then, is still sitting there. Here you see the Copper Mountain pit. And Murdochville right now, population of about 650 people, really working or surviving on seasonal tourist industry. Needless to say, they would love to see the mine go back into production, so we have tremendous local support for our project. So Glencore spent about 150 million, as you'll recall. Falco took out Noranda in the late 90s, and then Xstrata took out Falco Noranda, and then Glencore took out Xstrata, so this asset changed hands 3 times before Glencore reclaimed the site at a cost of 150 million Canadian. The smelter's gone, the mill is gone, there's one water treatment plant still operating at a cost of about $250,000 a year, which we have assumed. And the idea is to expand the Copper Mountain pit, again, significant resource sitting here. And the question I often asked is, why didn't Noranda expand the pit in '98 rather than shut down the mine? Well, 2 reasons. Copper was down to 80 cents a pound. Secondly, the smelter was right on the edge of the pit, so it became impossible for pit expansion. The site, again, has been appropriately reclaimed. This is the tailings pond, now a grass field. Water quality in the Copper Mountain pit, which we have to dewater, is actually adequate. It respects both DFO and Quebec ministry standards for reject into the aquifer. So as it stands now, the project is very attractive with a nearby infrastructure, including the town of Murdochville, highway access to the coast, where there's a deep water port and a railhead. The land is located on the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq First Nation. And right now, the project is at resource development and PEA stage. We currently stand at 495 million tons of 0.37 copper equivalent, and that means copper, byproduct moly, and silver. Unfortunately, no gold. The current pit footprint is as this. So pit wall here would be about 600 meters away from the current town, with Copper Mountain acting as a shield, so there will be no need, in our view, to move any portion of Murdochville. The deal with Glencore was straightforward, US $25 million payable through issuance of a convertible note at 40 cents, including half warrant at 46, milestone payment at US $20 million upon commercial production. More importantly, Glencore was the commitment to spend $55 million over 4 or 5 years to get the project to shovel-ready status, or FID. Glencore retains a 1% royalty on Copper Mountain, and also retains offtake on 100% of concentrate produced. Geology is very simple. It's a porphyry copper skarn system. So again, our focus on pit expansion. There is, however, potential for additional definition of resources, both a Needle Mountain located around one of the initial open pits mined by Noranda in the 60s, and also a higher grade material in the underground skarn deposits. But as I said, our focus is on the pit expansion. We're working to make this as a standalone open pit operation. So since 22, we did about 37,000 meters of due diligence and resource definition drilling around the Copper Mountain pit. For security reasons, Glencore will not allow us to drill in pit, so we had to drill on the margins, which made for expensive drilling, but that allowed us recently to take that data and convert the resource to an indicated status. So we're looking at about 3.2 billion pounds in pit of copper, or 1.47 million metric tons, with about 180 million pounds of byproduct molybdenum and almost 28 million ounces of silver over life of mine. Key to the project, though, is the starter pit. The deposit contains a higher grade core right below the existing pit. So our starter pit is projected to mine the first 3 years at higher grade. This summer, our drill program will focus on better defining that higher grade core. We estimate about 50 million tons at better than 0.6 copper equivalent. The only significant intersection we're able to use when we're drilling from the pit margins is a directional hole that flattened out right below the existing pit that cut 300 meters of 0.93. So this summer we will be able to go back and drill from the benches, and we have a 5,000 meter program designed to define not only better define copper, because it's going to allow us to convert some of that resource to measured category, but also bring in more reliable moly and silver byproduct numbers. Mineralization is fairly typical of a porphyry system, both in porphyry and the host rocks. The host rocks here are not volcanic, it's entirely sedimentary, so they're located in hornfels, which are cooked up sediments, and you get typical array of 3 or 4 sets of stockwork veining of copper and moly mineralization. Skarn mineralization will be accessed at the bottom of the pit in C zone, which is higher grade and is again fairly typical of copper skarn disseminated material. Recently, we completed our first pass on metallurgical testing for the PEA. Copper recoveries to date are very encouraging, around 93%. Molybdenum at 65. We think with further testing we can get that up to 70. Silver at 70, and copper grade and concentrate will be running around 26%, which will make for a high quality copper concentrate. Ball mill work index sitting around 3.5, so basically the ore would be average hardness. Going ahead for additional resource potential, this summer we have another additional 5,000 meters. Drill program has actually already started last week to try to define near surface resources around the original smaller Needle Mountain pit called the A zone. Eventually, we will be going back to do underground drilling in the E-zone where high-grade skarn mineralization running roughly 3% copper and about an ounce silver were left behind from the previous operations, and which require additional drilling for expansion. But this is down the road right now. For next year, we're focused on improving resource definition in both Needle Mountain and Copper Mountain. So on the social licensing side, we've been proactive. We've made several community presentations, both with Micmac First Nation and the town of Murdochville. The project's been well received. No red flags to date. And so our timeline for the project is on 7 years, starting 24. Next 4 years, complete environmental impact studies. Finalize the PEA, which is due next Q1, and move on directly to feasibility. The objective is to get the end of 28, including the BAP in Quebec, its public hearing process, to get us to final investment decision. Following that, 2-year mine build. So if all goes well, we could enter production in Q1 2031. Pine Point is joint ventured with Appian, as I mentioned. Again, past producer, run by Cominco. Again, another iconic Canadian mine, closed down in 1988. Which means, again, available infrastructure, road network to Hay River, and from the Hay River, rail network directly to Edmonton on the transcontinental line. The deal with Appian is simple, $100 million investment in which they acquire 65% interest for a total investment of $75 in the project and $25 million payments in cash to Osisko. The current resource sits at around 16 million tons, measured, indicated, inferred 47. A new resource estimate is actually due to come out in the next 2 weeks. What I love about Pine Point is the outstanding quality of the concentrate, not only from historical production, Cominco days, but our own work. Comparing Pine Point to the 5 biggest zinc producers on the planet, both are major trace elements, you see that Pine Point concentrate is exceedingly clean and low iron, and by reference, very high in zinc. So this is going to be an extremely highly marketable product, which is one of the reasons Appian got involved in the project. So our First Nations agreement Pine Point include 2 collaborative agreements and 1 exploration agreement with the 3 communities, and right now we're working on IBA framework to get that done by the time we complete our feasibility. So our 24 objectives, quite ambitious, but we're fully financed to go ahead. We've completed our winter drill program at Pine Point for the eminent MREs I mentioned, coming in 2 weeks. We've already released our updated MRE on Gaspé copper. We are going to launch feasibility at Pine Point this quarter, launch environmental baseline studies at Gaspé copper, additional definition program, as I mentioned, at Gaspé copper, and we are scheduled to complete our PEA at Gaspé copper in Q1 2025. Share structure is simple. We control internally about 40% of the float, known institutional and retail, add another 13, so we can account for 54. So the takeaways, again, we're very bullish, especially on copper. As most of you know, copper has performed very well in the last couple of months, touching 5. Right now it's settled back to 440. In our books, any copper price above $4 is good news, but we anticipate that this should be maintained throughout 24, and in 25, we firmly believe that copper could reach $5 a pound and maintain that going forward. And of course, at these prices, Gaspé copper is a very attractive project, but most of all, it's one of the safest jurisdictions in the world for mine development and also permitting. It's still a 5-year process, but we know exactly what we have to do to get to those permits, and of course, Quebec government very supportive of the project because it's a critical mineral. It fits into their agenda, and it's the biggest copper development asset in Eastern Canada. Thank you very much.